Good morning.
Describe the investiture.
Wonderful ceremony in the new church, which is 600 years old in central Amsterdam today. Very nice singing. And interesting feature when we reflect on New Zealand also being a monarchy, each of the members of Parliament stood in that church and redid their oath of allegiance to the King, having done one previously, obviously, to the Queen. So that was rather a lot of members of Parliament all getting up and doing their oath.
Why were you there?
I was there because the Dutch royal family is very, very supportive of the United Nations, and the United Nations Secretary-General was asked. He could not go, but I understand the palace indicated a particular interest in having me there because of the work that the new king and his wife, Queen Maxima, do on development issues. So, for example, the king has had a special envoy status for the UN working on water and sanitation issues, which are among the Millennium Development Goals, for quite some years. And Princess Maxima, as she was a banker in her previous life, and she took on the cause of microfinance, inclusive banking, and enabling poor people to have banking services. And my own organisation, UN Development Program, works directly with her. So I went because I really value and appreciate the work they do for us.
They've got a communist agenda, and the way that they want to do it is to break the capitalist system. And a lot of the things that you're talking about tonight that are happening in this country are happening in lots of countries around the world, and they are to create unrest. They are to break the capitalist system as much as they can. And
I thought the UN would thrive on capitalism.
Yeah, well, you would think so, but the world bankers are behind it, and they want a communist-type system, but, of course, they won't be subject to the laws of communism because they'll be the ones that are in the power seat, and they'll be the ones that are holding all the purse strings.
Right, okay, yep, so it won't affect them, but the rest of us can be treated as though we're all in a commune.
Yeah, as serfs. And so this is what their agenda is. And apparently they tried to set up a world government system, and the world bankers don't want to be in the firing line as recognised as having doing this because it makes them an easy target. So they set up the United Nations, or actually after the First World War, they set up the League of Nations. And it was the Americans that rejected it because they were a lot more schooled up on the democratic system and what their constitution said and everything else. So they rejected it, and because the Americans are the major world power at the time and at the moment still, the whole thing fell down. And so the world bankers realised that the American people were far too clever, and they had to dumb them down. And so they went about buying up all the major newspapers in America, and they own Time magazine, Life magazine, most of the major magazines, National Geographic. They're behind all these propaganda instruments. You have to be able to know what they're up to read between the lines and get out the information that you want.
Right, and this is all in this book, is it?
Oh, no, he hasn't detailed it in that book. I've read it in other books.
Right, this is in other sources, yes, okay,
yeah.
Right.
You're just asking me what their agenda is.
Exactly, I thought it might have been in the Econ, but this is in other sources.
Yes.
So that's the agenda. That's the sinister agenda.
Yeah, but the other interesting thing is the only way that they decided this time, well, they'll set up the United Nations, which came at the end of World War II, and the only way that they could get the Americans in, by then they had the propaganda, they owned all the TV stations, the major TV networks and radio stations, and so they were able to slowly and bit by bit propagandise the people and get them into their way of thinking with all these news media things that they had. And so they set up the United Nations, and the Americans bought it because it was David Rockefeller who donated the land of the United Nations in New York for the United Nations building to be built. And so the Americans having the United Nations building on their own land, it was their baby, and so they had to get behind it. And that's it in a nutshell. But
all right, so are you going to the Al Gore seminar?
No, well, he was mentioned in that book. And it's interesting about Al Gore because on that national day that they have each year of everyone turning their lights out, they noticed that he had all of his lights on around his property.
That's
turning
right. Yes.
Yeah.
The Gore lights were blazing. Very good. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All the best. 9 to 2, News Talk ZB.
In The Frog and Duck, the Peterborough